Hi, Isabel. This is your dad, of course, and I'm making you a video this morning, November 9th, 2016, to tell you some things. Some things I think that maybe you'll understand a little bit better when you're older. You just came down and you were being a kid, an almost 11-year-old kid with a smile on your face and doing loop-de-loops with a water bottle like we were doing last night at the Democratic Party in hopes of a victory dance. Instead, this morning, I found myself with too much to say, too much for you to understand. I don't even know how to break the news to you that Donald Trump won the election last night and is now our new president. I've talked to you a lot in the last month about what politics means, what an election means, about how the states have to win and how we have to try to win Pennsylvania. And we've talked about bullies, we've talked about why there hasn't been a woman president before. We've talked about all of these things, and especially in the last week, the three of us, your mom and me and you, have worked our hearts out at field offices, making signs, putting up signs. You watched as mommy and me made phone calls, and you came along with me and knocked on doors trying to get out the vote. And I know that this is going to be your first political memory. This is the beginning of your story as an American. And this morning, as I was about to tell you the news about the election, this news that has shocked the world, I just didn't know what to say, and I knew that it wouldn't have been an easy thing to talk about. So, I'm making this video to give myself a little bit more breathing room to talk about why this matters, and maybe figure some things out on my own here. Okay, so the first thing that really needs to be talked about is, how did this happen? How did nearly the entire world think that Hillary Clinton was going to win easily last night? And how did this wave election, this kind of popular uprising, happen instead? Well, we live in a very divided place here in the Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania. I mean, we're pretty much 50-50. As hard as we work getting out the vote, we only won our own county by 7,000 votes. And the neighboring county in Bethlehem and Easton, they lost by about the same. As we knocked on doors and talked to people, it was pretty split. I mean, there was many fathers who were voting differently than their wives. There was many neighbors with different signs up. And ordinarily, this is how a democracy should work. This is the essence of democracy: a hard-won fought. I don't know how to talk. I'm tired. um, we try our best. One side wins, the other side goes, okay, let's move on. But it hasn't been that way for a while. Instead, what has happened is something called polarization, a word that you don't know yet, but it means that there's two sides, and they don't talk to each other. Instead, they point fingers at each other, and they just talk to themselves. And so half believes this, half believes that, even if it's not, completely separate. I mean, honestly, most Americans do believe a lot of the same things. But when we get so wrapped up in our election, as we did these last, 18 months, we forget the important stuff, the core stuff. We forget that government is the act on doing things together. It is our way to make decisions together. And in order to do that, in order to change anything, we need to compromise. We need to come together in a room, hear everyone out, hear everyone's side, and then, as you learned in your Quaker school, come to a consensus. And that means that both sides need to compromise. And then ultimately, you come away with a decision that not everyone wanted completely, but it's a decision that reflects the will of the group, and we can move forward. Instead, what has been happening really since 2000, so for 16 years now, instead, what has been happening is that both sides don't want to listen to the other side. And all they do is try to block what the other side is doing. And this has happened particularly during the last 8 years while Barack Obama has been president. Our government is supposed to be one of give and take. Instead, it has become one of my side versus your side. And it doesn't take a lot of thought to see why this is a bad thing. You just think about how it is when you're trying to decide how to what to play with your friends, or how to share, and all different things that all kids learn how to do. All kids learn how to do, how to take turns, how to how to share, how to give. And these very same core human principles are supposed to be the underpinning of our democracy. But instead, it's turned into something completely different. And even though I'm wearing a Hillary button, I am not a Democrat. I have never been a Democrat. I've never been a Republican. I've always been an independent. And that is my expressed choice, because I do not believe in a party platform. I don't fundamentally believe that one side should come to the negotiating table with a list of demands. I think that undermines the very idea of democracy. For a bunch of people to get together in a convention and decide upon, these are the things we are going to do. Now that's, in its sense, it's okay. There's goals. I can see messaging. I can see talking points. I can see lots of different things where you would want to come together and unite upon one approach. Okay. But when you go from goals, from requests to demands, it's something else entirely. And And so this is why I'm an independent. And ultimately, I believe that the only way out of this to make your world a better place, to make your America a safer place to have an opinion, to express your opinion in public safely. The only way to do that is to go beyond parties. The only way to do that is to come into every conversation expecting to be surprised, expecting to learn something from the person across from you, expecting to compromise. And until our government can do this, until our government can move beyond their dogmatic entrenchments, I guess that means the same thing. We're never going to move forward. We're just going to play Ganipkana for the rest of our lives, you know? And now everything I'm talking about compromise and conversation, this all has to do with what are called policies. A policy is a stance. It's an opinion on how to proceed. It's a goal or a demand. So policies are what set the different political parties apart. They're the things that you're supposed to fight over in an election. They're the things you're supposed to fight over while doing the business of government. But this election has brought something else out that is much more disturbing than mere difference of policies, or a difference of opinion on policies. This election has brought out the triumph of marketing over substance, the triumph of saying what people want to hear without any regard for how to actually achieve it. And in my opinion, this election has brought out the very height of lying and bullying and blaming as a way to gain power. Donald Trump is a bully. Now, he might not personally be as much of a bully as he comes across on TV. It's possible that, you know, if you were sitting in a room with him, that he would be not quite the bully we see. I don't know that. I can't speak to that because we've only ever seen the public Donald Trump. So, but what I do know is that I've known Donald Trump for years. I've known him my entire adult life, more than that. He was a very public figure in New York City, where I grew up, and when I hear him talk, he is not surprising to me. He is trying to sell you something. Okay? Now, all politicians do this. There are others who are sometimes authentic. And I think that this is the real key. This is the missing piece from our politics, which is authenticity. So as you grow up and you listen to Donald Trump talk, if we do our job, you will recognize that he is full of it. And I'm not trying to character assassinate at all. What I'm saying is directly verifiable, even just using his own words, even just using his own before and after positions on things. He is saying what he thinks the people want to hear. He is saying the thing that is going to sell. He's a salesman. He's a marketer. Now, my dad had an advertising agency. I know what marketing is about, and there's different kinds of marketing, and there's one kind of slimy way to do it, which is just outright lie to get somebody to agree with what you're saying. And there's lots of different ways you can do this. You can use the psychology of persuasion to get people to do things. And when you do this, while pointing the fingers at others and blaming people, blaming ethnic groups, blaming the press, blaming everybody, except your own crowd, that's called being a demagogue, which is really just a big grown-up word for bully. Now, up until now, we've mostly been able to ignore Donald Trump. I mean, when we were down in Kanawha and we were, you were being babysit by the villagers who were telling us that Donald Trump bought half their island and now wouldn't let them even work there or go to their half of the island that, they lived on. I mean, that was impactful to us and to, our empathy for the villagers that we met. But, for the most part, we could ignore Donald Trump until today. Because now, this power-hungry demagogue, this shoot from the hip, say whatever occurs to him bully, is now the most powerful person on the planet. And his style of delivery and his approach to politics, to governing, will now encourage other would-be demagogues throughout the world. And this has happened before. And so a lot of the people that you met in the last week, and Mom and me, we're very worried. We are waking up today stunned. Watching the news last night, all of the reporters, all of the people who live and breathe this stuff, when it became apparent what was happening, they were almost speechless. They were very surprised about what happened. So those that voted for Trump, they're going to say, we have made history. Look at what we've done. But most of those people were excited about another president named George W. Bush, who, in my opinion, was not qualified for this job of president, and who put us into some very dangerous places, including a war in Iraq, and he was kind of asleep at the switch as our economy collapsed in 2008, and potentially could have avoided the 9/11 attacks. And those same people that were absolutely sure that George W. Bush was the right choice in 2000, in 2004, who are absolutely, they believed it and believed it and believed it. In 2009, nobody wants to talk about Bush anymore. And nobody wants to admit that they were wrong the first time with him. And these same people, I truly believe that in 4 years, or God forbid, 8 years, they will also say, wow, what a mistake that was. And so the question is, how is it that half of the country can vote for these unqualified presidents? How is it that our entire media, all of the pollsters, almost every single newspaper endorsed Clinton, even ones that never endorsed presidents. Almost every single one endorsed her, which is unprecedented. And the reason that happened is because it is so clear to someone who is not governed by anger, to someone who is simply not trying to stop, to throw a wrench into the wheels of government. It is so clear to a thoughtful, rational, educated adult that Trump could be a disaster for this country. It is so clear that nearly everyone who comes close to that description couldn't even imagine that he could win. Couldn't even imagine it. So how is it that we had half the country? Well, like I said, most people, they don't think about this stuff as much. They don't, all they know is that the government is there, and there are things, what called Obamacare, and last week the insurance rates went up, and and people don't like getting taxes taken out of their pay, and people, well, ultimately what it really comes down to is bashing the other side has become a spectator sport in this country. We have TV networks and websites that really are these echo chambers where people just reinforce unsubstantiated claims, where people ignore innocent until proven guilty, where people can find comfort in their own group and find strength collectively to blame other groups. There are a lot of smaller groups that are very frightened this morning. African Americans, Latinos, gays, women, people who have always been marginalized, who have always had to fight more than me to have their voice heard. And the last 50 years has been this constant struggle by all of these groups to have an equal seat at the table while decisions have been made. And that's kind of what our democracy is about. And the prospect of the first African American president handing over the reins to the first woman president, the dream of that breakthrough had a lot of us motivated and hopeful, and instead we got slapped with a dose of reality where we allowed the systematic radicalization of the right over the last 16 years to become strong enough so that it just washed over all of us. Because when you look at all of the criticisms, all of the critiques of Hillary Clinton, and there are many, when you really look at them and you hold someone to task, and I have these conversations all the time, well, what is the deal with Benghazi? And then you kind of keep going and you peel back the layer and you peel back the layer and you ask them, well, then why is this and okay, I don't understand. Why is this compared to this? Why is that? And you just keep digging. There's no there. It's like you just keep pulling and pulling and pulling until you realize that it's all supposition. All it is gossip made real. Gossip. Private email servers and whitewater. And when you get down to the core of it, when you actually get down to the core of it, there are some pretty stark truths. And that is, yes, all politicians are duplicitous. That is true. I don't like it. Nobody likes it. A politician is going to smile and shake your hand and then do something else. It is the nature of this power-grabbing endeavor. And it is our job as citizens to remain awake to that and to hold them to a higher standard, to make sure that that happens. But somehow, in the last 16 years, that's been thrown out. We no longer have an effective press to do that because it has been demonized in this election. I shudder to think of the loss of power of the press in the next 4 years. So we no longer have a professional class of people who try to find the middle ground and inform the public about it. We no longer have that. Instead, we just have these different rooms that are going, wah, 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 that are trying to rile up their audience. So the press has failed us. And the internet is not too much better because now you don't have to venture into the other side to get your information because now you can stay safely ensconced in your own echo chamber and never have to deal with what's going on somewhere else. Well, that has to stop. And ultimately, that's what is needed more than anything else, more than compromise, more than kindness and diversity, more than fact-checking, verification, more than all of these things. What we need in our national discussion is authenticity. Say what you mean what you say. Look into the camera and ignore what they think you want to say and simply speak your mind and have a conversation. Allow yourself to be swayed. Don't write speeches. Just talk. So I don't know what the future is going to bring. I know that a lot of us are just going to tune out the news for a while. I know that a lot of us are just going to go into a state of mourning right now. And we've been through this before. In 2000, you'll learn about that election. It was a tough one. It was a really tough one for us. So you and I will continue this conversation as you get older, because one of my most important jobs as a father is teaching you how to be an American. And it starts with questioning what other people say. When someone tells you, I don't know, Hillary is a crook, okay? Just as Hillary's a crook. The thing that comes into my head, because I don't care if she's a crook or she's not a crook. If it came out that she was a crook, I'd be like, crap, throw her in jail. I would. But we've never gotten even close to that. So the proper question is to ask, what makes you think so? Listen. Well, can you point to some facts? No, really. And this is why we have courts and attorneys and judges. Because not everybody agrees on whether something is true or something is not. And so what you need to do, particularly when you're accusing someone of something, is you have to present evidence. And the evidence has to be weighed. It has to be verified beyond a reasonable doubt, and only in that case can it be used to determine whether someone is guilty or not guilty of what you're accusing them of. And in an ideal America, an America that I still believe in, that I knew growing up, the press acted as the attorney, presenting the evidence, and the people were the jury or the judge. We listened and we decided. But at least when I was younger, there was a standard of proof. You couldn't just have a presidential candidate just saying stuff and having half the country agree with him. All right, I'll be generous, 40% of the country agreeing with him. I think a lot of people weren't really paying attention to this election, and they made a protest vote. And I think that, I think there are a lot of good people who voted for Trump who don't like the idea of Trump as president any more than I do. But they believe in the platform, the policies that he would at least enable. And they just wanted to, get the Republicans back in power and completely put their head in the sand about what kind of foreign policy and trade disasters that can happen. I'm afraid to look at the stock market today. I am afraid. Because the world knows what this means, even if half of our country does not. So anyway, these are just my thoughts on this historic morning. And ultimately, it's going to be okay. Our government is pretty resilient. The framers put checks and balances. There's going to be some unfortunate things that happen. Some things that were positive will now get undone. And our national discourse, I don't know what's going to necessarily happen. I think this could be the catalyst for more authenticity. This could be the catalyst for a candidate that unites us. I think about this all the time. I think about what I would do if I were running for president. How I would appeal to all of these groups that feel unrepresented. And, honestly, with no experience in government, I feel like I could do a better job than what I'm seeing. So maybe as kind of a civics lesson, you and I will figure out what it would be like to become president. Learn what's necessary. We got a taste of campaigning in the last week. Maybe as an exercise in inventing the kind of America we want to live in, you and I can find a message that works for more people. See if we can't get to 60%, 70%, 80% of people that say, yeah, I like what he's saying. And I think, or she is saying, I think that Americans want authenticity. They want leadership. They want to feel safe in the world. I think they want to feel like their taxes aren't being wasted. I think people want to pay down the debt. It's common sense. I think they want fairness in tax policy. And I think they want a candidate who answers the question directly and doesn't spin and doesn't make promises and claims that are not supportable. You should live your life like PolitiFact is rating you. Rigorous honesty. I think America's ready for an honest, authentic, inspiring politics that seeks to build consensus and to include as many voices into each decision as possible. And with so many millions of people in our country, I can't imagine that there isn't someone that can do that for us. Let's find the message and the person together. Anyway. Time to wake up to the world. And time for me to actually tell you that Trump is our new president.